became very clear to the British that the only way to rule over India was to divide Indians. That's why they were not good rulers. When the Second World War was fought, it was very clear that it was being fought to make the world safe for democracy. If I were to rewrite policies, I would have changed first the policy of
Discover unseen history. Listen now on History Uncovered.
Welcome back to our podcast, History Uncovered, where we discuss unseen history from an unbiased perspective with a twist of humor. In this episode, we once again have Mrs. Anu with us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so for those of you who didn't watch the last episode, Miss Anu is our high school history teacher. She comes with a lot of experience and across multiple boards and multiple schools. And this is the second episode of a two-part series on communalism as well as the Indian independence movement as a whole. So if you want to watch the first episode, it's in the link in the description.
Okay. So in the last episode, we spoke about Indian communalism and the role it played in the Indian freedom struggle. Let's roll back some clips from it. So we had a great talk with Miss Anu in the last episode, but in this one we're gonna discuss about the struggles for Indian independence. So in the later stage.
Okay, so we're gonna start by continuing our discussion on the 1857 revolt, and we're gonna talk about like the impacts. So we've listed down three main impacts, which are the Government of India Act, policy and consultation with the Indians, and military reorganization. So starting with the Government of India Act. So what did it like entail?
So it became very clear to the British that the only way to rule over India was to divide Indians. The Second World War was fought, it was very clear that it was being fought to make the world safe for democracy. And America had joined the war, and it was very clear that all colonies had to be liberated.
Yeah.
And a lot of economic aid had come from USA to fight the war. And that was till the British were not able to win the war, the Allies were not able to win the war, till such time that they had USA's support, and USA was clear on democracy and liberty and freedom. And that's when it became very clear to the British that they had to go from this country. They had to go, and they could not hold on to it for very long. And it was also very clear that they were the nationalist fires had been fanned in this country. There was like a lot of nationalism, and a lot of nationalist fires had been fanned. And under Gandhi, and the Quit India movement had happened, and before that the civil disobedience movement had happened. Especially it had become clear that it was not in revolt of 1857 was still centric in it was centered in the north. But after that it became clear the Congress had become so important. It became clear that everywhere people were demanding only one thing. They just wanted the British to go. And also another thing that I can say that would have probably happened at that time. That any war comes with a lot of economic hardships.
Yeah.
Right? And that Indians were forced to fight that war. It was the British war, but we were forced to fight it. And the impact of that war was seen on India as well. So with the economic hardships that were happening in India, you only blame your government for it, right? For any economic hardships, you blame your government. And when you blame your government for any economic hardships, you want that government to go. And that is why it became other than the nationalist sentiment, it was also the economic sentiment that the British should just leave the country.
Yeah.
So
the historians that we researched have similar reasons for the British leaving India, but Aisha Jalal in specific. So in the last episode, if the viewers haven't watched it yet, we discussed her bias towards Jinnah and the Muslim League as a whole. But she talks about how communal tensions in India, fueled the exit of the British because they wanted to avoid further violence in India. So do you think that's a fair factor to include?
She says that they wanted to avoid violence. That is, of course, important. But communal tensions were something that the British kind of, they encouraged it.
Yeah.
Right? They definitely encouraged it. And if you encourage communal tensions, it comes with absolutely, it comes with violence. It does come with violence. Right? So that happens.
Yeah. Also, could you speak more about the geopolitical change during this time and how that impacted the British in leaving India?
So, till now, Britain had been the superpower.
Yeah.
And Britain had been the biggest, we all know that it's a set that the sun never sets on the British Empire because they had so many colonies.
Yeah.
But now things had changed because, the revolution had taken place in Russia, and USSR was there. And there was USA on the other side, and they had played a very important role in bringing the war to an end, which definitely Britain couldn't have fought on its own. They couldn't have fought the war on their own. So it became very, very clear that there were new superpowers to replace Britain.
Yeah.
And Britain's position in world politics was going down.
Yeah.
So it was no longer the force that it had been till now. And it was clear that the sun was setting on the British Empire.
Yeah.
And it was important that they let go of, their colonial possessions. Till the end, they were not, out of all their colonies, they were not willing to let go of India because that Queen Victoria had the title of Empress of
Empress of
India
India.
added to her name,
Right.
and that kind of it was really something that that they wore with a lot of a title that they wore with a lot of pride. So they were not willing to give up on that.
Mhm.
So then it became very clear that, but by this time, with USA in its place and even USSR, because USSR and USA were not for colonization,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
wanted to be so. Geopolitically, new leaders had emerged, and Britain had to kind of let go.
Right. So, out of all these factors, we cannot ignore that nationalism was a huge factor, which played a key role in Indian independence movement. So, the great extent of this nationalism was, which led to the exit of the British, was also the effort of multiple Indian revolutionaries. So, let's discuss now about such revolutionaries during this period, starting with Bhagat Singh. What do you think, or how do the figures like Bhagat Singh and like organizations like HSRA, how do they contribute to the Indian independence movements?
So I think we've had this discussion before, where I've told you that they did play a very important role. They were very young people.
Yeah.
They were teenagers who decided to sacrifice their lives, give up everything, because they wanted to see the British out
Yeah.
of this country. Today, as historians stand, and as we are now in this century, we are not okay with violence.
Yeah.
Right? So their role has little bit been diluted in Indian
Yeah.
history
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
We don't talk about it as much as we did. Of course, that is not to take away from what they did for the country, but I think today, consciously, it is government and policymakers and people who write books have diluted that a little bit, because we don't want, because people who don't understand their purpose fully may use their methodology in a manner that will not be befitting to their memory. They
Right.
may only understand
Yeah.
the methodology, they may not understand
Then
the purpose
Yeah,
behind
purpose.
it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why. But they did play a very important role, because they were youngsters who had just, imagine living in a time where you are just obsessed with the idea that you want to see these people go, and you don't mind giving up your life for
Yeah.
it. Okay, it's like being in the army.
Mhm.
Okay, youngsters who go into the army even today, they have that passion that they'll do anything for their country, and it's a similar sentiment that they had, and I think they deserve a lot of respect for that. But how we approach them in history and how we teach them in history, I think a lot of thought and a lot of caution is needed with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, talking specifically about Bhagat Singh, if you don't already know who he is, which is pretty rare, Bhagat Singh, he was an influential Indian freedom fighter and revolutionary socialist who played a pivotal role in the struggle for India's independence from the British rule. So, there are multiple perspectives of multiple historians regarding him. Aditya will explain a few of them.
Okay, so Bipin Chandra talks about how Bhagat Singh had a sort of like impact on like the Indian psyche. So he impacted, like he brought up the idea of nationalism within Indians, and especially with his obviously death sentence. It kind of caused anger towards the British. Like, would you agree with this statement?
Of course, like it's like the power of social media today has compounded that anger so many times.
Yeah.
When a wrong is done, obviously public anger can be used to bring a point forward.
Yeah.
Like, for example, these days in the news we are talking and hearing a lot about the Pune Porsche case.
Yeah.
And that is like similar, like, I mean, obviously they were not freedom fighters or anything, but the fact that the government has the attitude of the government, what the government has done, and how justice is not being served is something that is fanning public sentiment.
Yeah.
And similarly, it was like during that time that Bhagat Singh, like what they did and the treatment that was meted out to them, it really fanned public sentiment and it boosted nationalism.
And
Right?
also, do you agree with the fact that the press, especially like radios and newspapers like the Amrit Bazar Patrika, they had like a huge role in conveying these messages to the common people, which was
Absolutely.
then used to boost Indian nationalism.
Absolutely. And a lot of this press, when in my earlier talk with you, I was saying we shouldn't throw away the baby with the bathwater. A lot of this press, newspapers, English newspapers, okay, they came to us thanks to the British.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
But it became a tool against the British.
Mhm.
So we could use that.
Also, next, let's move on from Bhagat Singh and let's focus on Subhash Chandra Bose and the Indian National Army. So, Aditya, could you tell us something about Subhash Chandra Bose's role and how did the RNA impact India's independence for
So-
independence?
So this is just a brief of Subhash Chandra Bose, and so he was a prominent Indian nationalist. He was president of the Congress Party at a point, and he's notably known for the Indian National Army, and this led to, they fought in the Southeast Asia in Burma during Burma campaign, and there's a controversial side to his life because of his alignment with Hitler in World War II, and this sort of like impacts his image as a leader, especially in the West, not as much as in India. Yeah, so
So, do you
Yeah.
have any opinion regarding this?
His image,
Yeah, in the West.
I think he shouldn't be judged on that because it was the times that he lived in. The war as such, like the Great War, the World War, did not impact Indians as much, directly,
Yeah.
but the British rule did. And he just worked on the principle of my enemy's enemy is my friend.
friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He just worked on that principle. For him to gather support, and you don't really know, again, like I said, it's very difficult to rewrite history. We really don't know if the Germans really had the bandwidth to come and help Indians out at that point of time, considering they were fighting battles
Yeah.
on two fronts and they were losing, at one point of time. So it became, we aren't sure that if they will come, they would have come and helped us here. But the fact that they were it was enough to kind of scare the British that they still talk about him in a negative way. I think it would have been okay, it was okay. And Subhash Chandra Bose was not only putting pressure this was a way in which he was putting pressure from outside on
Yeah.
the British. There was also internal pressure that he
Right.
was putting, and that was way more important. So that, I think, was really his this thing, that he mobilized a certain section of the country that was feeling disillusioned with the Congress. He
Yeah.
mobilized them, he got them together, and in his own way he contributed to the nationalist movement.
Yeah.
So that was really his his contribution, rather than just viewing that, oh, he met Hitler and he asked him for support. Well, he wasn't. I'm sure his only purpose was to make India free. It wasn't that he was supporting fascism,
Yeah.
right? It was that, there are, even take it in today's context, there's
Yeah.
so many leaders who are controversial. I wouldn't like to name them, but there are so many controversial leaders, and people from all over the world, other leaders from all over the world, come and meet that leader.
Yeah.
Doesn't make them all bad. They
So-
remain what they are.
The international resistance which Subhash Chandra Bose got by his alliances with international leaders and parties really put pressure on the British rule in India, which added with the internal pressure really built resistance against the British rule in India. So Aditya, could you tell me some more perspectives about historians regarding Bose's alliances with
Okay,
the
so
Germans?
R.C. Majumdar, similarly to your opinion, he talks about how the alliance with the Axis powers was more about, you know, ending British colonial rule and not as much to do with ideology
Yeah.
in itself. And Aisha Jalal also goes on to say that, uh, you know, the the fact that like what he did for India outweighs, you know, his alliance with uh, like the Axis powers.
So you definitely do agree with this perspective,
Yes.
right? So, additionally, addressing the ethical implications of Bose's alliance with the Axis powers, can it be justified as a necessary strategy for Indian independence?
Uh, Again, like going back in history, I think it would have put some pressure on the British. It would have definitely put some pressure on the British, but maybe like his actually INA was making waves on its
Yeah.
own. So actually INA could have, you know, done stuff like on its own even without um, Bose meeting up with Hitler. That's what I feel, and that's my personal opinion. Okay, but having said that, he did meet Hitler.
Yeah.
He did meet him, and the INA did the work that it did. And it'll be safe to assume that it was a combination of everything that resulted in, you know, the British deciding to leave the country.
Right. So, we always talk about Gandhi's ahimsa. So, how do you think this approach of the INA would clash against Gandhi's approach towards ahimsa?
So Gandhi and Subhash Chandra Bose were obviously not the best of friends.
Yeah.
We know that,
Yeah.
right? Again, like history tells us that they had different. Like one point of time, Subhash Chandra Bose actually admired Gandhi, and he did speak with, like, you know, he was very fond of him. But then he got disillusioned. Like, you know, he did get disillusioned because, particularly at the times when there were like these periods of, you know, lull in the Congress, he thought that there wasn't much happening, and that's when, you know, this whole he had to mobilize people, and INA was obviously opposite Gandhi's. It was the opposite side of Gandhi's ideology, right?
Yeah.
It was not
Yeah.
like what Gandhi would have supported. But having said that, I won't say that one was better than the other, but yes, they both contributed. I don't think Indian history would have been complete, the nationalist movement would have been complete without either Gandhi or Subhash Chandra Bose. So both would have been really, really important.
Okay. What do you think revolutionaries played an important role in Indian independence movement, or do you think that uh, like the ahimsa method of Gandhi was like superior to, you know, the revolutionaries' methods of non-violence? I mean, of violence. Sorry.
Non-violence is always better than
Yeah.
violence.
Yeah.
That goes without saying. But I'm not going to belittle anyone's contribution. But yes, non-violence always wins. If you can put your point across in a non-violent manner, I think you're winning bigger battles. That is what I feel personally. I will not support violence at any cost. But I'm not going to belittle the contributions of the revolutionaries. They were very, very, very motivated people who had a purpose in mind, and they were willing to do anything. And it's a big thing to sacrifice your life for your nation.
Right.
They were willing to do that, and they were convinced, and they were very brave people. So we have to salute them for that.
So all of these policies and the revolutionaries played a huge role in the overall struggle for freedom. So, Ms. Hanu, my last question to you is, if you could go back and rewrite history according to your own way, was there anything you would change or any policies you would make for India to gain independence quickly, or anything that would have helped the country back in like 1900s?
I think as my students, you guys probably know this about me, that there are two things that I'm very passionate about. If I were to rewrite policies, I would have changed first the policy of education. I think inclusion in education was something that was missing,
Right.
and I think that was something that I would do if I could change things at that time. making education more inclusive. Girls were way less educated
Right.
than boys.
Yeah.
And that's the reason that a large part of the population, 50% of the population, nearly 50% of the population, which consisted of women, did not participate as much in the freedom struggle as the men and the boys did. So that is something that I would change. And secondly, which brings me to my second part, which is connected to this. I think women empowerment, and the British didn't do anything extra to work
Yeah.
on that, right? So that is something that I feel that things would have been different. Like, of course, Gandhi started that. He brought women into the fold. There were movements that happened in the country to emancipate women, so as to say. But I would still say that it was too little, and more could have been done. So I think education and women's rights are two things that I would really would have liked to go back in history and change.
Given the economical conditions of most of the people during that time, how do you think they would have afforded this education?
Well, the government was earning a lot from the Indians.
Yeah.
They could have made it free.
But the British obviously
The
didn't
British
want that.
obviously, that's why they were not good rulers.
Yeah.
Because a good government gives this back to you.
Yeah.
It invests in a social system where people get empowered. Good education comes through. And given the social milieu at that time, they could have been like separate schools for girls, boys, where the same kind of education was given. It could have empowered women differently.
Right.
But obviously they didn't want an empowered
Yeah.
population. It's easier to rule over a population that is not educated.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's what they decided to go by. Other than introducing English education to people who would work for them. That's it.
Yeah. So speaking about women's rights, do you think it's a proud moment for us, the fact that in our first election as an independent India, we had we already gave women the right to vote?
Of course. I mean, in England, women were fighting till so late to get suffrage. In the US, they were fighting till so late in fact, in England, the woman who was fighting for suffrage was of Indian origin. Sophia Dilip Singh was the granddaughter of Raja Ranjit Singh, of Maharaja Ranjit Singh of Punjab. So they were actually they were fighting till so late for suffrage. But in India, women have been voting from the first election onwards.
Right.
So yes, I think independent India has tried to empower its women. A lot needs to still be done.
Yeah.
But yes, we started. We made a start, and we are at it.
Yeah.
Perfect. That was great. So, as you saw in the first episode as well as this one, we covered a whole view of the first war of independence, as well as the journey of Bose and Bhagat Singh through the 20th century, along with the views of Miss Anu, which were very valuable. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So if you want to see more unseen history like this, make sure to follow us and watch other episodes which will be coming out soon. Thank you so much, Miss
Thank
Anu,
you.
for
Thanks
having
a
this
lot.
talk with us
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you.
It was great.